The Sunoco Mariner East pipelines are a series of controversial natural gas liquid pipelines under construction in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. The pipelines are intended to facilitate the transfer of natural gas liquids from the Utica, Shale, and Marcellus shale formations to ports on the eastern seaboard where the ethane, butane, pentane, propane mix will be shipped to Scotland for plastics reproduction. Eric Friedman of Thornbury Township, a spokesman for his homeowners association and the Middletown Coalition for Community Safety, discusses the impact on residents along the pipeline. Welcome to PA Voter Information Network. This is Larry DeMarco, your host. Do you watch my YouTube channel but haven't subscribed yet? Why not now? It's easy and free. Just click the red button and the bell right beside it, and you will be notified of all new content. This is part one of a three-part series. In this episode, Eric will discuss the chemical properties transported by the pipelines, the dangers of the chemicals, and how Sunoco was able to begin the projects. Eric, thank you for being a guest on PA Voter Information Network.
Good to be with you, Larry.
Eric, the Mariner East pipelines are in the news. Sunoco's pipelines that they're building across Chester County and Delaware County, and it's been well covered by the press. You have been given a role of spokesperson for both your homeowners association and this Middletown Coalition for Community Safety. Tell us what is in these pipelines that makes them particularly dangerous to the community.
Sure. Well, we have lots of pipelines in our area, Larry. As you know, these pipelines are different. The materials that they're proposed to transport are not gas that we're used to, methane that we use to heat our home. These pipelines don't carry that material, nor do they carry ordinary hazardous liquids like gasoline or kerosene. These pipelines carry byproducts of methane production, things mostly ethane, maybe a little bit of some other materials like ethane mixed in. These materials can be compressed into liquid form for transportation in pipelines, but if they're released to the atmosphere, they change from a liquid back to a gas, and in their gaseous form, they are colorless, odorless, heavier than air, they're extremely flammable or explosive, and the federal government classifies these materials as hazardous, highly volatile liquids.
They have their permission to build this, but both these pipelines, is it safe?
Well, the word safe actually has no objective meaning. They may use that word. In fact, they may use it precisely because it has no objective meaning. I might, for example, have totaled 3 cars in the last year and sit here and tell you that I'm a safe driver, and that might be true from my perspective. But the word safe itself has no objective meaning.
So what term is more appropriate to be used in our analysis?
The more appropriate term to analyze when you're considering risk is the word risk. And risk is a well understood term. It's comprised of the elements consequences and probability, and it is routine in the insurance business and in dangerous industrial operations as well to analyze risk in terms of consequences and probability of something going wrong.
What is the history and the track record of the safety? There I go, the safety. What's the track record of this chemical in these pipelines?
Well, so I'll start with consequences first, if I can. So there have been, unfortunately, many large releases of hazardous, highly volatile liquids with ignition, and so we've seen the enormously damaging potential of these materials. There's one accident which I discussed in another video in which every building within a 3 square mile area was damaged by a delayed ignition, highly volatile liquids accident.
Now, to be fair, this is not in Chester County or Delaware County, but this is just talking about the type of chemical that's being transported.
That's right, the consequences of a large release of these materials.
Right.
And it doesn't take much, frankly, in terms of looking at past accidents to understand that the consequences of a large release of these materials can be catastrophic, especially in a densely populated area. Transport an enormous amount of these materials. In one ethane accident that happened recently in 2015 in West Virginia, a pipeline ruptured, a 20-inch pipeline similar to the proposed Mariner East 2, and that pipeline released 1.2 million gallons of ethane, which is a typical amount to expect for a pipeline release of that size. So enormous quantities of extremely dangerous materials. Consequences, in the view of most people who have looked at this, are off the scale. So what about the probability? The other element of risk. Sunoco, it turns out, has had more than 300 accidents from its pipeline systems just since 2006. And that number of accidents makes it not just an outlier in the pipeline industry, but an extreme outlier. It's right at the top in terms of numbers of accidents that it's had. It had an accident as recently as June of this year, right here in Delaware County. That same pipeline that leaked in June had leaked 3 other times in our neck of the woods. So Sunoco has had many, many accidents in southeast Pennsylvania and elsewhere on its pipeline systems. In fact, the first pipeline that it put in service, which it now markets as Mariner East 1, leaked 3 times in less than a year after being put in service in about 2015. So consequences are off the charts. Probability is unfortunately way too high when you consider the record of this particular operator.
So Sunoco has a bad track record. Suppose it was the safest company, exact same chemical. What's your position?
Well, so it's possible to analyze risk without actually having had accidents. In fact, in the commercial aviation business, that's what we try to do on a routine basis, is to review risk and to mitigate it where necessary before an accident happens, not afterwards. So what we know with Sunoco is that their track record is particularly poor of keeping dangerous materials inside their pipelines. If they had never had an accident, it would still be possible to assess the risk. You'd have to use some other methods other than their actual track record. The risk would not be zero. It would be something greater than zero, and there would be other methods of assessing it.
So hypothetical, we don't have enough information. Present you the data, you can answer.
It's a hypothetical that doesn't apply because we're not dealing with a company with a good track record. We're dealing with a company with a particularly poor track record.
Fair enough. So how did Sunoco get the permission to build what they call Mariner East 1, which is in production or functioning as we speak right now?
Well, Mariner East 1 is a converted old pipeline that was built to carry regular hazardous liquids from the east to the west in the 1930s. And the information we have indicates it was probably dormant for a period of time before Sunoco decided to repurpose it and reverse the flow. And they now market that. It's not what they call it internally, but its marketing name is Mariner East 1. So Mariner East 1 is an ancient 8-inch 1930s era pipeline that's been reverse flowed to carry these materials from west to east.
So we have a track record on that one, and what is that?
That pipeline has leaked 3 times in the space of less than a year in 2016 and 2017.
How long has that been in production?
I believe that they started operating that pipeline sometime in around 2015. I should mention also this business of reverse flowing old pipelines has pipelines that have had this done to them have been involved in a number of serious accidents. And in 2014, the federal pipeline regulator issued what it calls an advisory bulletin about this practice. And what we know is that Sunoco did not fully comply with this advisory bulletin before putting what it calls Mariner East 1 into service.
So they already were using something pre-existing that they were able to grandfather in, but now they want to use a second pipeline. What do they have to do to get permission to do that?
Well, they're proposing to operate a second and actually a third pipeline transporting these materials. Those pipelines are called Mariner East 2 and Mariner East 2X. The principal thing that they had to do were 2 things. They had to obtain the rights to a whole bunch of new land across Pennsylvania, particularly here in Delaware County, and they had to get environmental permits from the Department of Environmental Protection.
Were they able to do that?
They were. Both of those things remain contested and under litigation in one form or another.
This has been part one of a three-part series. In the next episode, we will discuss how Sunoco got approval for the second two pipelines, Mariner East 2 and 2X, and the role that government played, particularly at the state and agency level.